What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So most of you guys know we're having some issues with the red truck, and today we're going to start working on it. I really just needed a break. I've been on this thing for like a year and a half every day, so I needed a little break from her, but today we're going to get some stuff done on it and see if I can figure this issue out. All right, boys, we got the truck in the shop, so there's a few things I'm gonna check. One of them being camshaft timing. So originally on the Volkswagen, how you set the crank is off of the flywheel to the transmission. Obviously we don't have that in the truck. So what I've been using is there's a mark on the harmonic balancer and the timing cover, but that is such a small diameter of a part that if you're off a little bit, it can make a big difference. So I feel like that's not extremely accurate. So what I'm gonna do is pull number one glow plug and stick like a wood dowel or something in there so I can see exactly when that number one is at top dead center. And then I'll verify my camshaft is in time with the crank, and I'll look at that mark on the harmonic balancer and make sure that's lined up. If not, we're gonna have to make a new mark and figure out a good way to get this crank at 100% true top dead center, and then we'll adjust the cam from there if it is out. So the right way to do this would be to have like a mag-based dial indicator or something to measure exactly when number one's at TDC. I don't have one, my dad has one. I might go run and grab that if it is out and I need to dial it in perfect. I might go grab that from him, just so I know for a fact that it is perfect. So for now, I'm gonna estimate with a dowel or screwdriver or something. You don't want to put something too sharp in there and scratch anything up, but you want to be able to stick it in there, and then when you rotate the motor, it'll come up, and at its highest point, that is true top dead center. Well, guys, I tried. I just took some welding wire and twisted it up. Doing it by feel is not accurate at all. I'm gonna have to go get a dial indicator and just do it right, because I cannot feel when it actually stops at the top. It's such a small amount of movement that doing it by feel is not going to be any more accurate than just going off that mark there. So I'm gonna get a dial indicator, set it up on here, make sure I do it right, and we'll see what we can figure out with this thing. All right, guys, picked up a dial indicator, and it's a mag base, but you got to have it on a steel, and there really isn't much steel under here. So yes, that is zip tied, but actually very solid on there. So what I'm gonna do is I got a couple of these little wood dowels. I got two different sizes just to make sure I got one that fit, but I'm gonna shove that down the glow plug hole and get that to contact the tip here, and then I'll be able to turn the motor over and watch the dial, and I can find the exact top dead center. But the only problem is the piston kind of dwells at the top while you're turning it, while the crank actually has it needs to turn enough to start pulling the rod back down, pulling the piston back down. So there's kind of a margin there. So what we're gonna do is find one side of the margin right when the piston hits the top and stops moving. We'll put a mark somewhere, and then we'll go to the other side when it starts to pull down, and right when it starts to pull down, we'll mark it again. And the center of those two marks is gonna be true 100% top dead center. So we're gonna see what we can do. Hopefully this is not too much of a chore to get, everything lined up and held in place by myself. So we're giving it a shot and see what we can figure out. So what I did here is I just taped on the dowel to the dial indicator. So just one less thing to try to hold in place and keep, you know, in the right spot. So we're going to stick that through the dial indicator down into the glow plug hole and hit the top of the piston. So if you can see that mark there on the pulley, it's a lot wider than the mark is on the flat or the timing belt cover. So the center of that mark centered up onto the timing cover is right about top dead center. So on either side of that mark is where I lined up when the piston hit the top and when it started to move down. So I'm going to set that right in the center, pull my valve cover, pull my vacuum pump, and see if the cam lock tool will fit in the back of the cam. Make sure that's in time. Well boys, I think this thing's in time. That cam lock tool slid in with no issues at all. So the cam timing should be 100% perfect. So if you guys aren't familiar with this motor, there's a slot in the back of the cam, and with that plate mated against the top surface of the head, that is actually how the cam is aligned. So that is why we are using that tool to align that camshaft. Alright guys, got this thing somewhat back together, so it's not timing. What I think I'm going to do now is swap out the injectors. So I have this set from that other spare motor I had from the Jetta, and I am going to swap these bad boys in since it's pretty easy really. It's just a couple lines, pull the injectors out and bleed it all again, but I want to get that off the list of things that could possibly be wrong. So let's get these things ripped out, get the new ones in, and see if anything changes. Alright guys, injectors are in, bled, and sealed up. So that's what I was doing with the punch. You want to torque the hold down forks, punch the top to get that injector to seat into that copper crush washer, and then you torque them again, and do that until you don't see any change in the torque value, until it doesn't tighten at all past 15 foot-pounds. So that's all good to go. Last thing we got to do, fire it up, go for a drive, and see if we fixed anything. I can barely hear maybe a noise. I don't know, it's hard to tell. We'll have to go bring it down the road and see what it does. Well guys, this is kind of strange. So I can barely hear the noise still. It's still there, but very, very, very quiet. Like I can barely hear it tapping when I let off the throttle, and then it goes away a lot faster than it did before too. So it's kind of strange. I'm gonna bring it back home and look over it again, and then I might let it sit for a few hours, try it again, and then let it sit overnight, try it tomorrow. And I just want to try it a few times from bone cold. I'll leave it outside, start it up cold, and try it tomorrow. And that should give me a good idea if the injectors changed anything. Alright guys, another thing I cannot help but notice, 60 miles an hour, or 55, 770 degrees. Before, in this identical spot, I was at about 950 with the other injectors. So that is kind of strange. Just because they're bigger injectors doesn't mean they should be pumping a ton more fuel in when you're just cruising. So there I am again, just cruising at a steady pace, 55, 770 degrees. So like I said, I'm gonna give this a few hours. I'm actually gonna pull it back outside, let it cool all the way off, try it again, and then I'll leave it outside overnight, try it again in the morning. But a couple weird things to note with these injectors, just changing the injectors. Like I showed you, EGTs are way down, but my boost is up, just cruising. I'll go watch my old video, but I believe I was around 5 PSI cruising at 55. Now I'm at 9 or 10. So that doesn't make any sense to me, but at least the EGTs are way down, so that's a good sign, I guess. Something could be going on with these injectors. Well guys, I just got back. It's still making a little bit of noise, but we're gonna let it sit outside all night and head out in the morning and try it one more time. It does seem to run smoother, but I'm not convinced that the injectors are the cause of the noise, but we'll go out tomorrow and see what it does. Well boys, started snowing on us randomly, coming down pretty good. So I figured instead of getting the truck all warmed up, having to let it cool off, I'm going to just pull it in the shop right now, and we're gonna tear the cam out, tear the lifters out, and I'll show you why. So the reason I'm gonna pull those lifters out is they're the black nitride lifters for a PD motor, which have a secondary spring in the lifter. And supposedly with an aftermarket cam, you're supposed to take that spring out. I never knew that. No one ever told me. It's the first I've ever heard of it, and people are saying it can cause a lot of noise. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna tear the lifters out, take that spring out, and then I also want to inspect everything, make sure every oil passage is clear, make sure the lifter bores look good, make sure the lifters look brand new still, because they should. They're only about a month old, so they should still look brand new. And I just want to go through everything in the top end of the head and make sure everything looks perfect. Alright guys, got the cam and lifters out. So basically what we got to do is take the plunger assembly out of the lifter. So make sure you do this on like a piece of flat wood, something soft. You're not going to mar the lifter at all, but you want to just smack it just down like this a few times, and that lifter center or the piston will pop out. And these are the springs that everybody's telling me I need to remove. So it's just a little spring right there. So I think this is a dual piston, and when you remove that spring, I believe essentially it deactivates the second part of the, or basically a second piston. So with an upgraded cam like I have, you're supposed to do that, I guess. So now all you got to do, flip it back over, get your piston, shove it in there, and it's just held in with a little clip, so it pops in, no problem. So we're going to do that to all the lifters, and then we'll throw them back in and try it again. Alright guys, since I don't have like the correct measuring tools to get down in those lifter bores and measure it, basically what I did is just took a lifter and put it in each hole and made sure there was no slop. And they're all super tight. So one other thing I'm going to do real quick before I put this thing back together is take the plug. There's a galley plug in the back of the block, or the back of the head, that feeds the whole head. And I'm going to pull that plug out, take my air compressor and blow into that port, and make sure I get flow out of every lifter hole and every camshaft hole as well, just to make sure none of those holes are plugged or anything. Alright guys, I blew through that main plug, and every hole in the head has plenty of flow through it. Nothing came out. Every hole is wide open, so that should be good to go. There's one more thing I'm going to do, is check, at least attempt to check the clearance between the camshaft caps and the cam itself. So what I'm going to do is one cap at a time. I'm going to put the cam in with no lifters. I'm going to bolt one cap on and tighten it, and then set up my dial indicator on the cam, and you can lift the cam up and you can basically feel and read the dial indicator and see how much clearance you have between the cam and the actual cap and the line bore of the cylinder head. Alright, we got the dial indicator set up and one cap torqued down. So now we're just going to lift the cam and we're going to read how much the cam actually raises. Hopefully you can see the dial indicator in the video. So I've got about 3 thousandths clearance, or at least the cam raises up 3 thousandths. So you could essentially say that's the clearance. So that is plenty tight enough for a clearance. So I'm going to check all the other caps, make sure they're all within 2 or 3, maybe even 4 thousandths should be acceptable. So I'll check those all. If that's all good, we're going to slap this thing together, because everything else checks out perfectly fine. Alright guys, I checked all 5 caps and they're all 2 to 3 thousandths, so perfectly fine with that clearance. So now I'm just going to wipe all this stuff down, recoat it in fresh oil, throw the lifters in, cam, everything torqued down, and we'll see if those springs made any difference. Cam's torqued down, good to go. So one last thing that is very important, that surface right there where the camshaft sprocket sits on that taper, you can see I already cleaned it with a brake cleaner, but just sliding the seal over it got some oil on it. So you need to make sure that it is 100% clean and there's not a speck of oil on that and on the inside of the sprocket itself, or else those two can slip, and if you slip timing, most likely gonna burn through a couple of valves. So make sure you clean that both surfaces with brake cleaner. Clean it a couple times just to make sure there's no oil at all on that surface. Well, we got this thing back together. So now I'm gonna do my typical oil prime. So I got the lift pump relay out. I got the injection pump unplugged. So I'm just gonna crank it for, I don't know, a couple times. Make sure I get oil pumped through the system. Then we'll plug it back in and fire it up. Well, we fired right up, but still ticking a little bit. It could just be the lifters obviously need to pump back up because we just had them out and pulled the whole plungers out. So a lot of the oil came out of the lifters, so they do need time to pump back up. So I'm not going on a total fail yet. We got to drive it, get miles on it, and do our tests. So let it cool all the way back down and try it again. Alright guys, I think we solved the problem. So this thing hasn't made a single tick since that initial first start. So like I said, I'm gonna have to try it a few times just to make sure, but I think we freaking found the problem. Alright boys, just got home and I was smelling a little bit of raw diesel when I was driving. I stopped, opened the hood, didn't really see anything. I get home and it is pouring diesel out of this return line from 3 to 4 injector. So you can see the ends all cracked up. So I left the lines on from the stock injectors and obviously they're not in the best shape. So it completely showered my motor with diesel. So I gotta wipe all that up, but good news, I think we found the issue. It didn't make a single tick after the initial first start, which is very, very, very typical with an hydraulic lifter. It needs to pump up and fill up with oil. So that is very common. So we're gonna have to give it a few more tries, let it cool all the way off, go on it again, drive it, and see if that lifter tick comes back at all. But I think we fixed it. Every single time I've started this truck, since I put this motor in, it's ticked. It's never had one start where it hasn't done it. This is the first start or first drive where it hasn't made any noise. So I got high hopes. I'm pretty sure that was the issue. Kind of strange that the stock lifters made the same exact noise. When I took those out and put these lifters in, the noise didn't change at all. So either those lifters were worn out, and with these springs and these lifters made the same noise somehow. But either way, I think we figured it out. We're gonna have to try it a couple more times, but I really hope that was the issue. So now all we gotta do is throw our big injectors back in the motor. With those stock injectors, it barely moves, so we gotta do that, and then we gotta figure out EGTs. We gotta figure out why, with the stock injectors, my EGTs went down so much at cruising speeds. Like I said, with bigger injectors, you really shouldn't be pumping that much more fuel in at a cruising speed. Obviously, under full throttle, you're gonna be pumping way more fuel, but at a steady pace, at a steady speed, there really shouldn't be much difference, I wouldn't think. If any of you guys are really familiar with that in diesels, let me know. I can't wrap my head around it. I'm gonna talk to a few tuners and see what could possibly lower my EGTs, because obviously this thing shouldn't be running at 950 degrees. It's just cruising at 55, and then I swap injectors and it jumps down to 750 or 770. So kind of strange. Let me know if you got any ideas on that. Now we need to get some miles on this thing, so I'm actually comfortable driving it now. Before, I knew something was up and I really didn't want to drive it. So that's the main reason this thing has just been sitting. I haven't felt comfortable enough with the motor to actually put miles on it. So now we can see how it runs, check fuel mileage, do all that good stuff, and have some fun with it finally. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Smash that thumbs up button, give it a comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.